Welcome to the Young Turks. Cenk Uygur, Anna Kasparian on a lovely, fascinating Wednesday for you guys. Anna, are you fascinated by today?
Yeah, super fascinated by today.
Indeed, thank you. I thought so. Lots of Donald Trump stories, of course. And then the sexual harassment stories continue to pile up. I told you it's a cultural phenomenon, it's a tipping point. That's a little bit later in the second hour. But you know, I'm gonna go old school here today, Anna.
Okay.
And start this show super random.
Okay.
A thought occurred to me just a little while ago. I used to do this all the time in the beginning of the show. Anybody remember Movie Phone? Yeah. You guys remember Movie Phone? Yes, okay. You might be too young for Movie Phone.
Movie Phone is when you would call and get movie times.
Yes.
Yeah.
In fact, I think I remember talking to you about it like a decade ago, right?
Maybe, yes.
If you'd like to see Batman, press 3. If you'd like to see Mr. Mom, press 7, right?
Yeah.
I'm just noting it for the record as to how quickly times have changed. We're kind of the frog in the slowly boiling water, except it's boiling pretty fast. Mm-hmm. Like that was like such a huge invention. You didn't have to have the newspaper. You didn't have to buy the newspaper or drive down to the movie theater to know when the movie was. You could just call and the phone would tell you when Batman was gonna play at Movie City 5.
Are you having like a midlife crisis? What's happening right now? I'm a little concerned.
You know why I think I had this revelation? And maybe we'll talk about it more in the postgame, but I got interviewed today about changes in the media. And the changes in the media are happening so quick, and people keep insisting, because they always do, because it's human nature, that no, everything's fine, everything's gonna stay exactly the same. TV's doing great. I don't know what you're talking about. TV's fine. And my point is, no, it's going to fall into the water, like those, unfortunately, like the ice sheets up in the north because of global warming, right? Like, dude, we had Movie Phone just a little while ago. That was because it seemed.
Remember MapQuest?
Yeah, but look, Movie Phone was pre-internet. The idea of looking up movie times on the internet, that would have been revolutionary at the time. And that was only like 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Right? And 10 years from now, we might be looking back and go, remember that they had this thing called a TV? And you couldn't just watch things when you wanted to. You'd like find a Seinfeld episode halfway through, a movie 2/3 of the way through, and you'd flip the channels and then you'd watch it. And your kids would be like, no, that's crazy. Who would do that?
Let me also open your mind up to another reality. Everyone at one point will become incredibly irrelevant, regardless of what you do, right? Like you and I, before we know it, we're irrelevant. It's gonna happen.
Wait a minute, this part I don't like. What do you mean?
Because one day we will be irrelevant. Like I hope it's not gonna happen soon, but it's just inevitable.
Of course,
right?
I mean, it depends on the time frame, right? If we're talking about 100,000 years from now, look, we're talking about, we never got to do it on the show. All right, we'll definitely say this for the postgame.
Okay, yeah.
The volcano in Yellowstone might erupt, in which case everyone in America dies instantly and almost everyone on Earth dies. Okay, trust me, we're all irrelevant. Okay,
yes.
Anyway, tytnetwork.com/join to pick up this conversation in the postgame. We do have a ton of stories for you guys. And if you're wondering, hey Cenk, is that a really cool Young Turks t-shirt you have on? Why, yes it is. Thank you for asking, shoptyt.com. If you're wondering, hey Cenk, are you guys double streaming right now? And am I seeing the Unity Reform Commission of the DNC in the other stream on youtube.com/theyoungturks? Why, yes you are. It's a double stream. All right, Casper, what's up first?
All right, you ready?
Am I in a funky mood or what?
Did you take Adderall or something? Like, what's happening?
No, I took Cenk. That's all I need.
Okay. All right, we have a lot of stories to get to, so let's get started. Donald Trump has been distracting those in the media quite a bit with the issue of calling family members of fallen soldiers. Now, recently he called the grieving widow of a Green Beret who tragically died on October 4th. His name was Army Sergeant LaDavid Johnson, and he died in an unfortunate ambush while he was abroad, and there were 3 other Green Berets who died as a result of that ISIS ambush. Now, Maisha Johnson was grieving in a car when she received the phone call from Donald Trump. And the perception of that phone call was that he was incredibly insensitive to her, allegedly telling her that he knew what he signed up for when he signed up for the military, but I guess it hurts anyway. Now, there were a number of people who allegedly witnessed this call, and one of those individuals was Representative Frederica Wilson from Florida. And so she made the media rounds and talked about what she perceived in regard to that phone call, and I want to share her perspective with you right now. Let's take a look.
She was crying the whole time, and when she hung up the phone, she looked at me and said, he didn't even remember his name. That's the hurting part. He was almost like joking. He said, well, I guess you knew something to the fact that he knew what he was getting into when he signed up, but I guess it hurts anyway. You know, just matter of factly, that this is what happens. Anyone who is signing up for military duty is signing up to die. And that's the way we interpreted it. And it was horrible, it was insensitive, it was absolutely crazy and unnecessary. I was livid.
So just to give you a little more information about the widow in this story, Maisha Johnson, she is currently pregnant with her husband's child, obviously, and he's not here anymore because of the fact that he was ambushed by ISIS. There's a photo of her grieving that has gone viral because it just perfectly captures, the pain that she's suffering at this moment. They had 2 other children together as well. So it's, Cenk, jump in, because it's hard to not rage about this story.
Yeah, so Maisha Johnson was on, if you're wondering why the hell was a congresswoman in the car at the same time, because she was on the way to pick up his remains. That's the picture you see there as this casket arrives, and she's devastated. And she was crying throughout the entire phone call with Donald Trump. And her aunt, her uncle were also in the car. The congresswoman's press person, driver, and master sergeant were in the car. And several people in the car have confirmed the conversation as the congresswoman has relayed it. Look, you think about the kid there that's on the way, and it's hard not to get really emotional about it. I think though that I've become a little too jaded by Donald Trump, and maybe it's for people who don't know who he really is. This comes as a more shocking story, but he doesn't have a script when he calls these family members, when and if he calls these family members. So are you surprised that Donald Trump said something inappropriate? I would be almost shocked if he didn't.
I'm 100% not shocked. It doesn't mean that every time it happens, I feel nothing, and I'm sure that's not what you're saying either.
Yeah.
When you see that photo of a widow grieving the loss of her husband because he was serving this country, and then you hear that kind of reaction from who's supposed to be our leader, it's devastating because the whole point of that call, which isn't mandated by law, is to comfort the family members who just lost someone who was serving the country. And look, just think about everything in context. Think about the discourse taking place in the United States right now in regard to our First Amendment rights and in regard to NFL players who are kneeling during the national anthem. He has the audacity to call those individuals unpatriotic while simultaneously either refusing to call family members who have lost their loved ones fighting in various wars, or when he does call them, disrespecting them by saying, well, he knew what he signed up for. Is that really what you say to someone who's in the process of grieving, who's literally on the phone crying at that very moment? It's just so incredibly heartless.
Look, since I think I understand Donald Trump's mind a little bit better, and that's a scary place to be, but I think that from his perspective, he thinks, well, that's why I didn't go to Vietnam. I didn't sign up for it because I didn't want to die. And so other people had to go in my place. My daddy got me a doctor's note that says I have some bone spur, which I don't have. So I chose not to go, that's why I didn't die. Your husband chose to become a Green Beret, so that's why he died. I think that that's just how he thinks it through. And so sad day for him. I get it, it still hurts you, but signed up for it. And part of that is a deflection of blame because it could never, ever be Donald Trump's fault.
That's right.
Now this was, they got ambushed, and it is very similar to Benghazi, but Benghazi was not actually Obama's fault, and this is not actually Trump's fault. So this ambush was a complete surprise, and I don't think, it's to the best of my ability to discern it right now, there is no facts that we know of today that says that it was Trump's negligence or incompetence or anything like that. But since he's being blamed for it, remember, he's only calling her because he just got heat in the press that he'd never called for 12 days after after they'd been killed. So he's like, oh damn it, I gotta make up for it. He picks up the phone, and since he's been asked about it at a press conference, he's feeling defensive. So he's saying like, well, he signed up for it. He signed up for it. It wasn't my fault. He signed up for it. But I get it. It still hurts. And she said the other offensive part, for the widow said, was that he didn't even remember his name. Trump didn't remember. And
he proves that in addressing this incident in the media, because he doesn't refer to Maisha at all by name, and he certainly does not recall the name of LaDavid Johnson. He just doesn't say their names. He just says the widow, the woman, the soldier, and it just shows that it's not. It just appears, and it's my perspective, right, that he doesn't care, that he seems completely untouched by this, unfazed by this, and as you mentioned, more concerned about his image and the perspective that people have, perception that people have of him and the job that he's doing. He makes everything about him. This is not about you. This is about our fallen soldiers. This is about family members who are grieving, and this is about doing what you can to comfort them rather than use it as an opportunity to defend yourself. It's just pathetic.
So, but again, the not remembering the name, it's a classic Donald Trump move. Of course he didn't do his homework. He never does his homework about anything. Doesn't matter how important it is. I mean, he didn't do his homework on potential nuclear war with North Korea. He still to this day doesn't know what's in the healthcare bill, and he proved it in another conversation earlier today with politicians. And so, is he gonna remember LaDavid Johnson's name? Of course not. If you thought that he cared enough to do the homework and remember that name, you don't know him at all. He's obsessed with himself. In another call that I think the Washington Post tracked, and they went and called up, yes, Washington Post, all the people that he has contacted, 13 different families. In one of them, it was Sergeant Cameron Thomas. This is not related to the recent ambush. This is from an earlier incident where an Army Ranger was killed on April 27th. Called his dad. His dad likes Donald Trump, voted for Donald Trump, didn't have anything bad to say about him. He just related an amusing story. And again, not in a way to criticize him at all. He was glad that the president had called him. He was honored the president had called him. He supports him. He just said, oh, I mentioned something about how I had voted for him. And he said that quote got him on another tangent, which extended the conversation for 10 minutes because he started talking about the strides that he's made, the quote, the strides that he's made in the short time that he's been president. Because they turned to Donald Trump, he's like, oh, thank God, okay, your son, whatever, right? So now let's talk about me for 10 minutes. He can't help himself, that's who he is.
And it reminds me of, President Obama going to a small town in Michigan that was positively impacted by some of Obama's economic plans, right? His policies. And so people in that community started to get jobs, they started getting paid more. And when Obama went there and took a little tiny bit of credit for his economic policies, they were livid and angry at him, right? And so, look, I bring that up as a comparison. It seems pretty incredible how Trump manages to do things that Obama would have never gotten away with. Like Obama got criticized for wearing a tan-colored suit. I mean, just put everything in perspective for one moment and think about that. All right, I want to go to the next video. It is Representative Wilson again, elaborating further on what she experienced during that phone call. It's pretty amazing. Take a look.
So when he says that you've totally fabricated what he said to the wife of the soldier, and he has proof, what's your response?
Well, I don't know what kind of proof he could be talking about. I'm not the only person that was in the car. And I have proof too. This man is a sick man. He's cold-hearted and he feels no pity or sympathy for anyone.
So there's a couple of things in there that are interesting, but one is what I looked up. Lawnews.com has a good article from Ron Blitzer about this. That's illegal if he taped her. Florida is a two-party consent state. Washington, D.C. is not. That's where Donald Trump presumably made the call. But in Florida, you need both parties' consent. Otherwise, it's a crime. If it was in commission of a more serious offense, it could be a felony. If it was not meant to, not done maliciously and for another purpose, it could be a misdemeanor. But it is a crime, and misdemeanor is no joke. I mean, high crimes and misdemeanors, I believe, is what you get impeached for. Now, look, I'm not saying you should be impeached for recording the call.
I mean, if it works, then yeah, he should get impeached. But nothing works. He's untouchable.
Yeah. Well, trust me, he'll get touched at some point politically. But anyway, so it's a crime, and remember, this is the second time that he has talked about recordings that he has. And I think we have this tweet from Donald Trump. He said in the tweet, Democratic Congresswoman totally fabricated what I said to the wife of a soldier who died in action, and I have proof, and then sad. Hey, first of all, you jerk of jerks, we're still talking about a situation where one of our soldiers lost his life and you didn't handle the call properly with his widow, or at least that's an issue. So can you still stay in the zone of, I feel terrible about the widow and the fallen soldier? No, just sad. Oh my God, what are you, who said I handled it wrong? I'm gonna kick their ass. That's not the time for this. Anyway, back to the illegality. He says I have proof. He said it about James Comey before, if you remember. He better be careful what he says because I've got proof that he said otherwise. He's taping everything. He's Nixon. He's a total moron. He's Nixon but dumber. Because you know why? And again, at the time during the Comey tapes, I went back and researched this. And there were articles after articles before he became president, when he was a businessman, of constantly recording all his calls because he wants to be able to have ammunition against you if you say something wrong. And he thinks because he's dumb, oh, that's okay, the tapes will never get out. Yeah, when you were a two-bit businessman slash carnival barker, the tapes weren't gonna get out and you could use it. When you're president of the United States, if you're recording calls, at some point, some prosecutor could get their hands on those, you moron. So for God's sake, Mueller, subpoena every call from the White House because he's got the tapes.
Right. Look, I don't know whether or not he tapes those phone calls, but what I do know is that he always claims that he has proof in regard to what he claims. So he claimed that there were millions of people voting illegally during the past election. He claimed he had proof. Where's the proof? He said he had proof that the Obama administration was wiretapping him. Never provided proof for that. He just says he has proof for all sorts of things that he's never provided any proof of whatsoever. And so I'm inclined to believe the perspective of Representative Wilson and also the widow who has spoken out, and the widow's family members who have also spoken out because they also happen to be in that car and they also heard that conversation. So Johnson's mother, Kawanda Jones Johnson, told the Washington Post, President Trump did disrespect my son and my daughter, and also me and my husband. So it is not the perspective of one person who happened to be in that car. It is the perspective of everyone who happened to be in that car. And it just shows, this utter lack of empathy and disrespect that he has for people in general, regardless of who they are or what they managed to sacrifice for the country.
So when Sarah Huckabee Sanders was asked about it in a press conference, they're like, wait, what does he mean proof? Is there tapes in the White House? She's like, no, of course not. There were other people in the room. Yeah, that's it, including General John Kelly. Oh, for God's sake, you're gonna bring him back into this. General Kelly's gonna be like, what do I have to do to stop you from talking about me?
Stop working for him, how about that? Step down. And you know what? I'm tired of all of the GOP, members of the GOP who are complicit in all of this, right? Later on, we're gonna talk about the whole healthcare debate and how Senate Republicans are worried about signing on to anything that the president isn't in favor of. What are you guys doing? Spineless individuals shaking in your boots over Bannon and Trump. How about you grow a pair and do your job as a leader, as individuals that were elected to represent your constituents? Oh, we're afraid to sign on to something that Trump doesn't like.
Yeah.
Spineless.
Look, buckle up for that part of the show, because that also has bad news. He's polling pretty high right now, Trump is. It is unbelievable. So, I mean, I've got theories on that, of course, but his numbers are going back up. We live in alternate universes, man, we do.
All right, let's move on to a different angle to this story. Donald Trump has received quite a bit of criticism in regard to a phone call that he made to a grieving widow. It was the widow of a fallen soldier, Army Sergeant David Johnson. And he was accused of telling Maisha, his wife, that he knew what he signed up for. And so it's interesting to see those on the right lining up to defend Trump and essentially telling the grieving widow that she should just be happy that the president made the time to call her in the first place. So let's start off with Brian Kilmeade. Here's what he had to say about that phone call and also about the criticism that Trump is receiving from Representative Frederica Wilson. Take a look.
Listen, this is one representative's opinion about what she thought the tone was and how it was being portrayed, the president to the slain soldier's family.
Do you really
think? Who are you to sit there and say, I am offended by the way the president's tone to this family? If this family wants to speak out, I get it. But for her to scramble and call CNN into this, make herself this major event is to me is totally inappropriate. So now everyone, when you go to a wake, when you go to a funeral, you're going to be graded on how the proper mourning.
So just to be clear, Representative Wilson is not the only individual who spoke out against that call, criticized that call in a negative fashion. Johnson's mother also spoke out about it, telling the Washington Post that President Trump did disrespect my son and my daughter and also me and my husband. And so other family members who experienced that call are also speaking out and talking to the press. So it is not just Representative Wilson who's sharing her perspective. It's not just one person. So that's happening. And so that is Kilmeade's commentary. Let's hear from another Fox News person.
My response to this was the president of the United States of America called to say thank you for your service. I'm sorry for your sacrifice. That in and of itself is extremely special that the president of the United States picked up the phone to call these families.
Well,
the president is not required to call all of the families. It's just extra special and very nice when they do.
So she's right that the president's not required to call the family members, but presidents typically do that because that's the decent thing to do as commander-in-chief. But also, what she doesn't realize is if a woman is grieving the loss of her husband, getting a call from the president where he says he knew what he signed up for is not extra special. Okay, I would rather not get that phone call. I would rather not get a call from Trump and not hear those words because that is not something that would comfort me as I'm grieving. And she knows that she feels the same way too.
So these are the same folks, by the way, who yesterday were defending Trump when he said Obama and Bush and other presidents wouldn't make the calls. And they're like, yeah, isn't that outrageous that those presidents wouldn't make those calls? Today they flip around and go, the president doesn't have to call. If it's our president, if it's the guy we like and suck up to, you're lucky he called. Why would presidents don't have to do this?
I know.
Just the day before, Trump was like, oh, the other presidents didn't do it. I'm so much better than them.
No, they will flip-flop and make points that are convenient to whatever defends Trump at that time. So they will aggressively criticize NFL players for kneeling during the national anthem, but then they will also aggressively defend Trump after he tells a grieving widow, oh, your husband knew what he signed up for when he joined the military. I mean, it's pathetic. And by the way, I love all of these people lining up to defend him, some of which are completely denying that he would even say something like that. In fact, Bill O'Reilly tweeted, no proof needed for the media, which immediately reported the congressman's allegations as truth. I don't know what was said, and neither does any other member of the press, but this whole thing has the look of a setup, doesn't it? No, it doesn't have the look of a setup. How soon we forget the fact that Trump openly criticized John McCain for being a prisoner of war. Okay, that was incredibly disrespectful to someone who served the country. Remember Kaiser Khan and the fact that he lost his son as he was serving in our military. What do you think Trump did in regard to that family, because they had the audacity to speak out during the DNC? He criticized that family, okay, because it's a Muslim family that had the audacity to ask Trump to read the Constitution. And then it's this ongoing thing with Trump. If he doesn't like you, it doesn't matter what you've done, doesn't matter how you've served the country, he will criticize you, whether you are a member of the military or not. So no, this is not surprising, and I would absolutely expect this kind of behavior from him.
So several different people in the car have confirmed the congressman's point of view. So I don't know what more proof Bill O'Reilly needs before the press is allowed to report something that was said by the president that many different people heard. You need 7 witnesses, 8 witnesses. What do you need, Bill? Right? And I'm sure that you felt the same way about Obama, right? That, hey, I'm not going to report anything negative about Obama unless I have 7 or 8 witnesses. I don't remember that, Bill. And then he's like, oh, well, it looks like a setup. They were on the way to get the casket. His casket was arriving. That's why the congresswoman was with them, and that's why you had military guys in the car, and you had their family members in the car when the president called. But of course, Bill O'Reilly didn't bother to do any research on that. One last one is Laura Ingraham. She's the one that actually got my blood boiling the most. Let's watch her.
I'd love to put Frederica Wilson on the stand, and I would impeach her credibility in about 30 seconds. She is a virulent Trump hater and a Tea Party hater and a conservative hater. She has every right. She doesn't agree with President Trump, that's fine. But don't hold her out as some paragon of credibility. Absolutely makes me sick. How many of you give much credibility to the woman who walks around with a rhinestone cowboy hat that looks like it came from Dolly Parton's, costume closet? No, she wears like a green one, and she's trying to play Maxine Waters for the. She's a combo of Maxine Waters and Sheila Jackson Lee. She's very. I'm all for colorful dressing, but you just like it looked like you came out of a carnival. This woman's a nutbag.
Okay, look, you can go on and on about how she shouldn't comment about the congresswoman's looks that way. I'm used to that. I'll tell you the thing that angered me more is the whole thing about, oh, she's a conservative hater, and hence she has no credibility. So Laura Ingraham saying that, I get it. She's prosecuting her case. But a lot of times that works in the media, and they're like, oh yeah, that's a good point. She's a Trump hater, conservative hater, so she has no credibility. Wait a minute, how about you, Laura Ingraham? You're a liberal hater, you are an Obama hater, you hate, like you and your entire network hate everything about progressives, you hate everything about the Democratic Party, you hate everything about Obama and Clinton, so you have no credibility. No. You're allowed to be a liberal hater, you're allowed to be an Obama hater, that's perfectly fine. But you are insulting good Americans by being a conservative hater. No, I don't like you, Laura Ingraham. You're a dirtbag. Okay, and you have no credibility apparently to comment about Obama or any other Democrat because you hate them. Okay, under your own logic, shut up. But you're not going to. No, you use this double standard, and a lot of the media, unfortunately, goes along. Oh yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, no, we should. The people who don't like conservatives, well, that's real Americans. They lack credibility. But if you don't like liberals, that's okay. That's fine. Bash them all you want. No, we're not playing that game anymore.
I want to play a game. You guys want to play a game?
Yo, let's have fun.
Let's play a game in regard to whether or not someone is credible based on their dress. Based on Laura Ingraham's logic, if you partake in colorful dress that's a little too colorful for her taste, you lose credibility. Well, there are other offenders on the right that I'd like to point out, particularly this individual. Let's take a look. Oh, that appears to be colorful dress. I would like to impeach her credibility right here, right now.
Besides, she hates liberals.
Yep, exactly. Well,
she's an Obama hater. She has no credibility.
Okay, so here's the thing. I absolutely detest tearing people apart based on the way they look or the way that they dress. Unless you're Alex Jones, then you deserve it. But in this case, I mean, really, that was your like credible talking point in regard to Representative Wilson, that she wears a cowboy hat that you don't like? That's what helps you determine someone's credibility. Laura Ingram's pathetic. You're pathetic. And what's even more pathetic is that she's another individual who is, on the right, who has no spine and doesn't have the balls to stand up to someone like Trump because, Trump might do some favors for her. There was some talk about her serving in Trump's White House. And so, yeah, of course, she loves Trump, even though he has gone against some of the things that she's preached about in the past. Laura Ingraham is a joke, okay? And she's a hateful, disgusting individual. And the fact that she's attacking someone based on a rhinestone cowboy hat shows that she is not a person of substance, and she doesn't have a single decent argument in this.
What I'm done with is the hypocrisy. When some people pointed out, they made comments about Kellyanne Conway's dress. And by the way, it was overwhelmingly not most progressives. They said, hey, don't do that. We didn't want people talking about Hillary Clinton's dresses. You shouldn't talk about Kellyanne Conway's dresses, etc. But it doesn't matter who did it. If it was a person on the internet, social media, it doesn't matter. The Laura Ingraham crowd were like, oh, how dare you? You see how sexist liberals are commenting on the dress of Kellyanne Conway.
That's why I brought that up. That's exactly why I brought it up, because there is that double standard. And here's the thing, the reason why that double standard exists is because Democrats, those on the left, get shamed real easily, right? As soon as something happens, I'm sorry, they apologize immediately. Republicans don't do that. Those on the right don't do that. They go ahead and they criticize people in the most childish, juvenile ways, and then they stand by it. They never apologize for it.
Yep. Okay. All right, I just want to touch on one last part of this story. Okay. So Washington Post did an amazing job of figuring out who Donald Trump has actually called, and among the grieving family members, about 20 of them so far, unfortunately, during Donald Trump's term. And again, almost all of these are just because we're in Afghanistan. Even the Niger situation was an ambush. I don't think there was anything they could have done about it. So I'm not blaming Trump for having 20 people die on his watch. That's, I think, unfortunately part of what comes along with the territory of us being in so many different countries. I don't think we should be in those countries. That's part of why I want to come back, because I don't want to lose any more of our fallen soldiers or have more soldiers pass away, etc. Anyway, but they reached 13 of the family members, and about half of them said yes, they did get a call from President Trump. And the other half said, no, we never got a call. No call, no letter, no nothing. So the guy who went around criticizing Obama and Bush for not calling the family members, of course, it turns out for about half the people that they reached, he hadn't called them. So his hypocrisy is, of course, boundless. We know that. But an interesting part of the story, and by the way, and some of these people are Donald Trump supporters. And here, let me give you an example of Whitney Hunter. This just came out right before showtime. She says she has nothing bad to say about the president, doesn't want to get into that, and it's not political at all. She just said she has great things to say about Vice President Pence, who she met, and he gave her condolences, and she felt really comforted by that. Her husband was Jonathan Hunter, who was killed in Afghanistan. But Pence and others said that Trump would call her later, and he never did. And she said, I do know the difference between right and wrong, and whenever you say you're going to do something, you're supposed to do it. So it seems like it's a person who respects the office, wanted to call from Trump, no bias here, no anything, but Trump still didn't call. Now, if you don't call and you don't criticize other presidents, okay, look, I don't know. I don't know to what degree you absolutely should call every one of those fallen soldiers, but you can't do both. But I'm about to get to something even worse. Did you want to say something, Anna?
I did, and I'm unsure of whether or not you're going to touch on another person that he called, a father who lost his son, and he made a promise.
Yeah, that's where I was going with this.
Okay.
Yeah, so all the non-calls are terrible when he's a hypocrite about it, and then there are the calls. So I told you earlier in the show about a call where a guy is a Trump supporter, the son was a Trump supporter, and but Trump went on a 10-minute tangent about how great his record in office has been, and the guy's like, oh, okay. But again, he wasn't criticizing the president. He was like, I appreciated the call, right? But one was super interesting. He called Chris Baldridge, who is the father of Army Corporal Dylan Baldridge from North Carolina. He was 22 years old, and him and two fellow soldiers were gunned down in Afghanistan by Afghan police officers, okay? And he calls the guy, and Chris Baldridge talks about, here, I'll give you the exact quotes. He said, President Trump, as the Washington Post explains, no, let's go to the one earlier that. President Trump offered him $25,000 and said he would direct his staff to establish an online fundraiser for the family, but neither happened, the father said. And now let's go to Chris Baldridge's quote. He said, I'm gonna write you a check out of my personal account for $25,000. And I was just floored. I couldn't believe he was saying that. And I wish I had it recorded because the man did say this. He said, no other president has ever done something like this, but he said, I'm going to do it. Now, the reason that this even came up is because Baldridge's ex-wife is actually going to get the $100,000 that people get when their family member dies in battle. And Chris Baldridge was saying, we're the ones having to deal with it. So without getting into that family drama, Trump seemed like he was doing a nice thing and said, you know what, I'll give you $25,000 out of my pocket. He does that so people like him, but he never follows through. We've done 1,000 stories where he promises he's gonna give money and doesn't because he's a pathological liar. And so it's one thing when you do it as a PR gimmick and you're a marketing clown and you're a civilian. It's another thing when you're president and you're calling a fallen soldier's father, and then you're like, oh, this will make me feel good. I'll promise to give him $25,000, and then I'll stiff him. It's like, that doesn't matter, I never deliver on my promises. Of course, nobody's gonna find out. How the hell are they gonna find out about this call? Because he didn't think that this would ever become an issue. I mean, he's such a bad guy because it's feeding his ego to say, I'll give you the $25,000. You didn't have to say that. You have no obligation to give him $25,000 out of your pocket, right? But he couldn't help himself because, he's got to feel good about himself. But he's not actually going to give him the money because he's not even rich. He's a scam artist. And finally, Sarah Huckabee Sanders, when asked about all of these and about the hypocrisy that you criticized Obama for not calling soldiers, he didn't, and Trump, it turns out, didn't call the family members. And it turns out Obama did actually go to a Gold Star event and sat next to John Kelly at the Gold Star event, right? Sanders says, I think that General Kelly is disgusted by the way that this has been politicized. Trump politicized it, but specifically mentioned General Kelly. No one mentioned General Kelly outside of Donald Trump. He's the one that came out and said, oh yeah, that's General Kelly if Obama called him when his son died. General Kelly, yeah, that's politics right there. And then she turns around and goes, I can't believe you guys politicize this. They are so dishonest. It's record breaking and it's disgusting, especially in this context. All right, we got to take a break, guys. When we come back, we've got a lot more for you guys, including shocking. Donald Trump changed his opinion on a policy. Further shock. It turns out that Republicans who said they were not going to cut taxes on the rich now say, well, I mean, there was nothing we could do. We'll explain when we come back. Yeah, I'm about to drink some moonshine, listen to this music. We once did in an episode of Old School. Check it out by becoming a member, tytnetwork.com/join. All right, so we have, oh shoot, I knew I was forgetting something. I forgot to check your tweets. All right, well, sad day. Let's move forward. In the post game, I'm going to talk a little bit about the really moving immigrant prison story movie that we showed last night live here on with Brave New Films. We did a panel in LA. We showed the movie, and it was really, really haunting. And I want to talk about it more. And I think you're gonna be. That's a story you care a lot about, Anna. So anyway, that's also on the post game. tytnetwork.com/join. All right, what's next, Anna?
All right. Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin is now changing his mind in regard to tax cuts for the wealthy. On various occasions, he made clear that during the process of tax reform, which we all know isn't really tax reform, it's just tax cuts, he would avoid allowing the rich to benefit from any tax cuts whatsoever. It was referred to as the Mnuchin rule, but he has since softened his tone in regard to the wealthiest earners, and now he has done a complete reversal. Now, before we get to his complete reversal, let's hear what he had to say back in November after the election in regard to these tax cuts.
Deductions we have in upper income taxes will be offset by less deductions so that there will be no absolute tax cut for the upper class. There will be a big tax cut for the middle class, but any tax cuts we have for the upper class will be offset by less deductions that pay for it. When we work with Congress and we go through this, it'll be very clear. This is a middle income tax cut.
So, if you are paying attention to the debates and any developments in regard to these tax plans that the GOP is rolling out, it's clear that there is a lot less emphasis on deductions, a lot of emphasis on a smaller amount of tax brackets, which would essentially cut taxes for the wealthy. Let's keep it real. And anytime there's any discussion about getting rid of deductions, it never has to do with corporate tax loopholes. Usually they focus primarily on possibly getting rid of the mortgage interest deduction that the middle class gets to enjoy. And so I knew he was lying there, but here is some evidence to show that I was right. Here is a statement that he made just recently.
What is the best way to go about convincing people that this is not a tax cut for the wealthy and corporations at the expense of middle-income Americans?
Well, let me just comment. The top 20% of the people pay 95% of the taxes. The top 10% of the people pay 81% of the taxes. So when you're cutting taxes across the board, it's very hard not to give tax cuts to the wealthy with tax cuts to the middle class. The math, just given how much you're collecting, is hard to do.
It's so hard not to give tax cuts to the rich. What could he do? He wanted to, but it's just a matter of math. Now, but wait a minute, you were the same Steve Mnuchin that back in November said, oh no, it's easy. We can just take away deductions from the rich. So even though their tax rate is going down, their overall amount of taxes will be the same because we're taking away the deductions that they use. Now, when you're actually going to implement the plan, you go, just kidding, not taking away the deductions, just giving them a giant tax cut instead. Now, what is the reality? He called it a middle income tax cut before. Today, Gary Cohn is still talking. He's the National Economic Council Director for Trump, said the wealthy are not getting a tax cut under our plan. Now, you want to know the reality? Tax Policy Center says that by 2027, the wealthiest 1% of Americans would get 80% of the benefits of these tax cuts. The top 1% gets 80% of the tax cuts. Well, there was nothing we could do. I mean, we wanted to give it to the middle class, they just wouldn't take it. So what do we, oh gosh, I guess we're gonna give it to the rich, almost all of it. Oh, Steve Mnuchin, are you among the rich? Golly gee, there was nothing I could do. Gary Cohn, who used to run Goldman Sachs, are you part of the rich? I guess I'm in the top 1%. What a break. How about you, Trump? How about everyone in the cabinet? What a lucky break. They're gonna get 80% of the tax cuts. Look, they wanted to give it to the middle class. They just couldn't figure out how. By the way, I can tell you how. It's not that complicated. You can cut the payroll tax. The payroll tax is just for the middle class because once you get to a certain number, a little bit above $100,000, the rich stop paying the payroll tax. That's the fund Social Security and Medicare, right? You can cut the payroll tax. What do they do instead? They keep increasing the payroll tax because they're redistributing the money to the top. So if you're middle class, and by the way, recently Cohn and Mnuchin acknowledged, yeah, with the deductions we're taking away, middle class might have their taxes increased.
Of course, of course. Why would anyone think for even a second that they would look out for your best interest if you're part of the middle class or the working class? I mean, Trump is so open and honest. He's so transparent about his disdain for the middle class and for the poor. He himself said that he wouldn't want anyone who's poor working in his cabinet. He only wants wealthy people working in his cabinet. I mean, in the past, he said that golf should be reserved for the wealthy. It is a wealthy sport. Like, he has shown time and time again that he has utter disdain for people who are not wealthy. Why would he look out for you? He's a con artist, okay? He has conned the voters. And that's the thing that drives me crazy. He's working so aggressively to dismantle any and all protections that you have under the Affordable Care Act. Your premiums are gonna go up because of what Trump is currently doing right now and because of the uncertainty in the market. What he's doing right now with taxes, it's gonna hurt the middle class. And not only in the form of, how much they're gonna end up paying in taxes, but also in the services and the goods and services that they rely on. Those things are going to get cut.
And we talk about the middle class here and how their taxes are gonna go up and the rich's taxes are gonna go down because apparently there's nothing they could do about it. But also yesterday on the program, I talked about how they're gonna punish the poor. So earned income tax credit goes to poor and middle class, ranging from about 23,000 to 56,000 or so. And after that, you don't get any earned income tax credit. It's for the working poor. You can't get it if you're not working, okay? So what did the Republicans announce? They're gonna do a crackdown on people that they claim are committing fraud at the earned income tax credit. Most experts say actually most of it is honest mistakes. But even if you do the crackdown, it turns out, and this is what drives me crazy about the Democrats, it was already in a terrible situation. The IRS was committing 1/3 of all their resources cracking down on people making less than $25,000 a year, which they got almost no return from because they paid, they're in such bad shape. What are you gonna get back from them? $5, $35 at most? And they leave the rich alone when the rich, just as a matter of percentages and raw numbers, when they commit fraud, and I'm not saying they're more fraudulent than any other part of the bracket, although I'd ask you to do a study on that. I'd be fascinated to see how it came out. You would get a lot more return back into the treasury. And what did Trump and the Republicans announce? They said, we're not spending enough money cracking down on the poor. So they're gonna do a new round of crackdowns on people making less than $25,000. And if they strip the earned income tax credit away from them, taxes on the poor also go up. So tax on the poor, tax on the middle class go up, tax on the rich go down. There's nothing they could do about it. It's just math. That's what can they do? The poor guys, they tried. Well, it turns out they got to take money from you and put it into their own pockets.
We got to take another break. Let's do that. And when we come back, an update on Trump's efforts to further destroy the Affordable Care Act.
All right, back on the Young Turks. Member shout outs, Dax Mitchell and Mary Reeder. You guys are awesome. Thank you for supporting independent media. And in the postgame today, I'm going to rage a little bit more about private prisons, but we'll also have some fun and talk about how quickly life is changing, as we talked about in the beginning of the show. All right, some tweets. Oh, tytnetwork.com/join, of course, to become a member. Pink Room Music says, terrible what these families are going through. We have to get this motherfucker out. It's time to turn it up. Okay, from your mouth to God's ears. And Admiral Marston says, what? Republicans want tax cuts for the wealthy? I am shocked, shook even. Say it with me now. Of course. I mean, how do Republican voters not realize that the entire point of the Republican Party is to give tax cuts to the rich? How could they not know that? And again, my blood boils at the incompetence of the Democratic Party.
Yeah.
As I told you before, this is not, I got news from folks who did the polling. In almost every state, Democrats are seen as the party of the elite.
Party of the what?
Elite.
Well, they act like it.
But I mean, yes, unfortunately that's true. But the Republicans are way, way more the party of the elite. God, the Democrats are the worst at politics.
Look, I forget which congressional race it is, but I read an article today about a candidate in a congressional race getting backing from Hillary Clinton, and she's gonna give a speech to support this candidate. No, what is wrong with you? What is wrong with you? Are you crazy? What you're gonna, okay. Anyway, I'm done. Like in the immigration debate, why hasn't there been a single Democratic lawmaker on cable news talking about the fact that Trump increased the number of foreign workers that can come in the country just so Trump Industries can hire more foreign workers? While this immigration debate is happening, why aren't they doing that? Why aren't they putting Republicans on blast? Why aren't they putting the Trump administration on blast? They're like sitting back, twiddling their thumbs, playing patty cakes. It's driving me crazy.
Anna, powder dry. We got to keep that
powder.
You got to keep that powder
Jesus
dry.
Jesus Christ.
They're the driest powder in the world, plus Russia. Okay.
What does that even mean? Where did that phrase come from?
I'm sure it came from a Democratic consultant. No, it's from the way back in the day that if you started using your powder, if your powder got wet, it was useless. But if you started using it, it had a higher chance of getting wet, apparently. I don't know much about muskets. So you got to keep your powder dry.
Oh, it's
gunpowder. You thought it was like makeup powder? That's awesome.
Sorry.
That's great.
Yeah.
God, we're so real. Okay, what's next?
All right. Following Trump's executive action, essentially ending subsidies to private insurers to help keep costs low for the poorest Americans so they can afford health care, there was a bipartisan effort by Senators Lamar Alexander and Patty Murray to continue the funding for another 2 years until they can come up with a better solution. Now, after this legislation was made public, Trump stated, just as recently as yesterday, that he was supportive of the efforts. However, he has completely changed course today. In fact, he changed course last night and decided that he was no longer supportive of the legislation. Now he's saying, I am supportive of Lamar, meaning Senator Lamar Alexander, as a person and also of the process, but I can never support bailing out insurance companies who have made a fortune with Obamacare. Also speaking to reporters later Wednesday, Trump said that if something can happen, that's fine, but I won't do anything to enrich the insurance companies. So again, he has completely flip-flopped on this issue, and it seems as though he is no longer supportive of this bipartisan effort.
So let's dive into, in this case, it's a little bit of hypocrisy, but it's mainly that Trump doesn't know what the hell he's talking about. Before he flip-flopped, he had said, this is the bipartisan compromise was a quote short-term solution so that we don't have this very dangerous little period for insurance companies. So that's a dangerous period for insurance companies, and he doesn't want them to be in danger. Then he flips around and goes, I'm not supporting bailout of insurance companies. They're already getting too rich. Wait. Do you have any idea what you're doing? Do you know what's in the bill?
No, he doesn't.
Do you know what's in your executive order? Like, and which side are you on? It doesn't. Whoever he talked to last, and so yesterday he talks to the establishment Republicans. In fact, we showed you he had met with Mitch McConnell. They whispered sweet nothings in his ear, and he's like, "Oh yeah, that makes sense. This is a dangerous period for the insurance companies. We have to protect the insurance companies, and they're our donors, right, Mitch? Yeah, right. Okay, great." Comes out and says that. And then he talks to whoever, I don't know if it's Steve Bannon or some populist or whatever. And oh no, I'm sorry, it's actually, I know who it is. It's Club for Growth and the incredibly rich donors. And now there's donors on a couple of different sides here, right? But the donors who want to kill Obamacare, the reason they want to do it like Club for Growth is because remember, there's still that $700 billion in tax cuts that the rich can get if you get rid of Obamacare completely.
That's right.
And the Club for Growth represents those guys. So Club for Growth comes in and goes, Mr. President, no. The insurance companies are getting bailouts. Now, you wanna know what the reality is? The insurance companies are, yes, it's true, they're getting money from the government. Is it a bailout? No, it is to subsidize low-income Americans who otherwise can't afford insurance. Otherwise, the insurance company goes, there's no profit in insuring them and I'm not going to do it. So the only reason to do it is so that those guys are insured. Now you could insure them in different ways. You could do it directly through the government, but then they would howl even more, right? So it's not necessarily to help insurance companies, it's to help low-income Americans. And Club for Growth thinks, I'm not a low-income American. I want tax cuts for the rich, and I don't give a damn what happens to low-income Americans. They're gonna lose their insurance? I don't care.
Of course they don't care. But there's something that I haven't seen a lot of discussion about, and I'm curious if you noticed this as well. So as we know, if Trump doesn't get exactly what he wants, he will intimidate Congress, he will bully Congress, but if he doesn't get exactly what he wants, he will do what he wants unilaterally through executive action. And that's what happened with ending these subsidies for these insurance companies so they can subsidize low-income earners so they can afford insurance. It's interesting that his executive order attacked that specifically rather than the mandate, right? Because that was one of the issues that those on the right have been furious about. You're forcing us to buy insurance, you're forcing us to do this and that. Which, by the way, the whole point of the mandate, even though I think it's a flawed system, was to pressure young people, young healthy people to also buy insurance to keep the costs low for those who would otherwise have even higher premiums. But why didn't he get rid of that? So the mandate stays in place, but the subsidies end, meaning premiums will increase. If you're poor and you can't afford that insurance, you're gonna have to pay that tax penalty at the beginning of the year when you file your taxes. Like, I don't know if he thought this through or if this was done intentionally, but I find it interesting that the first thing he did was attack the subsidies. And if he wanted to attack the subsidies, why didn't he also go after the mandate as well?
So I have the answers. First of all, did he think it through? Of course not. He's never thought anything through in his life. If you said to him, name the thing that you took away with an executive order last week, there's no way he can do it. It's cost sharing reductions.
I got rid of the bailouts.
The thing with the insurance company was outrageous, and I got rid of it, okay? Okay, but what is it called?
Many people told me that they were happy about that executive order, many people.
It was a beautiful, big, beautiful executive order. Okay, but what was it about? Anyway, and Schumer got really frustrated because remember, in the thing that he's now against was a bipartisan compromise. The Republicans and Democrats negotiated and came up with a compromise. And Schumer's like, he doesn't know what's in the bill. And so he keeps flip-flopping because he's never read it. So what's the real answer? What's going on? It's because Club for Growth steps in and goes, hey, Donald Trump, and by the way, Paul Ryan too, and Paul Ryan is the most bought man in America. You guys are now going to oppose this, otherwise you're gonna lose your donor money. And so and why do they do it? Because not only does it help the rich eventually, but it's not that they gratuitously want to hurt the poor. I don't think they're evil, right? I don't think so. You might disagree with me. It's because they know that the poor are powerless and can't fight back. So the first thing they're gonna take away is anything that helps the poor, and they are funded by wealthy Americans. So they tell Trump, that thing you don't know what it is, go back to taking it away. And he's like, oh, okay, all right. Wait, are you with Trump? Or are you gonna give big, beautiful money donor money to Donald Trump? You are? Okay, great, then I'm with you. I'm back to with you. I'm gonna put a tweet on that. That's what happened here.
This is so devastating. And remember, as this is all taking place, all of this, indecisive, flip-flopping behavior, it leads to instability and uncertainty within the healthcare market. Private insurers get scared and they increase premiums. Even if nothing's passed, even if Trump didn't sign that executive order, right? Premiums were gonna go up anyway because of all of this confusion happening in Congress and in the executive branch right now. And all of us are gonna suffer as a result of that. We have no idea how things are gonna turn out, and no one loves that. No one hates that uncertainty more than the private insurers.
All right, let's do the next story.
Okay.
It's a big, beautiful story.
A district judge in Las Vegas is facing some backlash after, on multiple occasions, she said that she would be more lenient with people convicted of crimes if they follow through with their probation order and voted for Trump. Okay, so let me give you the exact details of what she said. The judge is Susan Johnson. She is from Las Vegas, and according to 2 transcripts that were obtained by the Nevada Independent, this district court judge told 2 defendants pleading guilty to felony charges that if they follow through on all of the terms of their plea agreements, they might be able to vote in the next election, specifically for Trump's re-election. So let me give you the 2 specific examples that were reported about. At a July 18th sentencing hearing, Johnson told defendant Gregory Galzin that, who was pleading guilty to battery with use of a deadly weapon, that she would suspend a minimum term of 28 months in state prison and allow him to serve probation for 2 years instead. If he followed the terms and conditions of his probation, he could be honorably discharged and able to vote in, quote, plenty of time for the 2020 election. She also said, that way your civil rights would be restored and you would have plenty of time to vote for Mr. Trump on the next election, okay? Exactly a week later, she also told a defendant by the name of Reed Anthony Morris, who was pleading guilty to attempted burglary, something similar. But if you do everything I tell you to do, you've got an opportunity to do some great things, and possibly, depending on the time, you might be able to vote for Trump in the next presidential election. Now let's stop for a second. There are laws, for good reason, preventing judges from doing this. Judges are not supposed to pass down sentences or make rulings in any type of politically biased way. They are not supposed to pressure anyone to vote in a certain way. Again, there are laws against this. And so after it was written about, she was like, oh, I was just joking. These were all, I'm trying to be humorous. It's not a big deal, except it is a big deal, okay? There's an imbalance of power. You are a judge who is determining the fate of these individuals. And when you talk about, oh, and then you can vote for Trump, that's essentially pressuring them to vote for your candidate of choice.
Yeah. If it turns out that she's progressive and was actually joking, I'd say, don't do that. That's a really bad joke. And as a judge, they have no idea you're joking. They might take it seriously. It's just improper completely. But if we were to find out that she was a conservative who voted for Trump, then where's the joke? There's no joke.
So her voting record is sealed, right? And that's a privacy issue that I'm supportive of. We shouldn't have to know who someone voted for. However, we do know that she made one political donation, and it was for someone on the right. So let's go to graphic 30. Her only state or federal political donation is $500 to a group called Leadership PAC, and it was in 2014. The PAC is registered to Dave McKeon, a former Clark County Republican Party chairman and current Republican candidate for Congress.
Oh, so it turns out she likes the right wing and thinks that everybody should vote for Trump. That's so funny. Yeah, that's not a joke. And it's wildly improper. But to me, the most important part of this is, and look, I think the criminal justice system we have in America is way too draconian in the first place. And I hesitate in criticizing any judge that actually is not draconian. But taking away a 28-month prison sentence for assault and battery with a deadly weapon And it was a minimum, mandatory minimum. So I didn't even think that you could take away mandatory minimums, but somehow if you're gonna vote for Trump, you can. So she took that away from him and then said, make sure you vote for Trump. No, by the way, I mean, just think about it. Even if that's not improper and she was gonna do that anyway, and now we don't know. By the way, that's part of the reason it's improper, because we're not sure why you're making the decisions you're making now, if they're based on your politics or if because you really thought he shouldn't have to go to prison for that, okay? But even if you were gonna make that decision anyway, I mean, how could you not think that that guy just thinks, oh my God, I just got away with 28-month prison sentence that I would have served for an assault with a deadly weapon, and she told me to vote for Trump, that was the deal. There's no laugh track. It wasn't in the middle of a sitcom. No, he thinks that's the deal.
So there were other instances where defense attorneys witnessed similar comments that she made, and I want to give you a quote from one of those criminal defense attorneys, and this is following her defense, indicating that she was just joking. So Joel Mann says, I did not take her comments at the time as a joke. I was shocked about what I was hearing and couldn't believe that she said that. So look, it didn't come off as a joke, even if she meant it as a joke. And regardless, you're not supposed to say those things as a judge. You keep politics out of your ruling, you keep politics out of your sentencing process. There are policies in regard to this for good reason. And you saying that it was just a joke is not good enough. Again, there's a huge power imbalance there. You are a judge determining the fate of these individuals, and it's essentially pressuring them to do something that they may not want to do.
Remember, the defense attorney is thrilled that she's knocking down the sentence.
Right.
So he should be on her side, but he's like, what did you just say? Now, it doesn't mean that they actually have to vote for Trump. We all realize that.
Yeah.
They could be like, all right, sucker, great. Thanks for getting me out of jail. No, I'm not voting for Trump. But the very act of saying that as a judge is, as I think you've got by now, obviously improper.
Yeah. Do you want to do Bannon?
No.
Okay. All right, we're moving on. We're gonna take a break.
Bannon's at war with the Republican Party. You know that. Okay, when we come back, like I told you, I think there are going to be more and more women coming out and explaining what they went through. I think it's an important cultural moment. And then at the end of the second hour is the most devastating story. It's about how many people think that the media just flat out makes up stories because they're against Trump, and then Trump's polling as well. So that when we return.
Do you trust the establishment media?
The United States economy has never been better. Monetary policy is spectacular.
Everybody thought Jamie Dimon was the king of Wall Street last week. Well, it might be Ken Lewis now. He takes the crown. The best Salesforce out there is Merrill Lynch, and now it goes to BofA. It's pretty amazing.
Pretty amazing. Lewis now. Buying opportunity.
I do think this is a buying opportunity. We're going to see a stabilization and just a tremendous snapback.
The rally will be jaw-dropping.
The Occupy Wall Street movement is not a spontaneous protest against economic inequality.
This is what we mean by the establishment press.
It is a well-thought-out campaign.
To bring down the infrastructure of this country.
The embarrassment is that I'm given credibility in this world because of the disappointment that the public has in what the news media does.
I'm the former chairman of the Veterans Committee, and I've learned a little bit about the cost of war. What the president is trying to do, and I agree with him, is to do everything that we can without going to war.
So what do you say to your critics? I'm talking about Democratic critics who say, you know what, he's really just a socialist pacifist.
I very rarely read in any coverage of Bernie that he's a socialist.
Bernie Sanders is a socialist, for God's sake.
Most analysts are saying that Hillary Clinton's going to win in a landslide.
I continue to believe Mr. Trump will not be president.
We've got Trump at 279, 259.
Wait a minute. No.
I know you don't believe that.
We're not going to be polite
anymore. You know what we're going to do? We're going to fight back.
Fight for a free and independent media. We're done with politeness. We fight back. We are going to put together the best investigative reporting team in the country. You like Jordan Chariton in the field, challenging Democrats? He's the one that took down Donna Brazile. Thank God for that.
Give me 10 Jordan Charitons. Look at the damage I could do.
TYT will give you the 4 horsemen, and we will let them gallop. Help unleash real journalism in the country. We don't need anybody else anymore but you guys. TYTnetwork.com/go. This is going to be amazing.
Hey, Jen, what's up?
Aaron, did they change the icon for Vine? I can't find it.
All right, back on the Young Turks. Chris Duran writes in, I thought the GOP hated executive orders. Didn't they whine when Obama made them? Oh, I forgot Obama has a D next to his name. I mean, the way they turn around on a dime is amazing. You know why? Because they have no conscience. They're like, executive orders are unconstitutional and dictatorial. Executive orders are awesome and mean that you're accomplishing a lot and delivering on your campaign promises. What? I didn't say it the day before. No, yes, you fucking did. I saw it, I have it on tape. Okay,
yep.
Michael Ritchie, he says about the guys getting let off, but promising to, or being admonished to vote for Trump. Not a bad deal. Trump won't be up for re-election, so sign me up. I hope you're right, Michael. All right, we've got a lot more news for you guys. Casper.
All right. Roy Price is now the former CEO of Amazon Studios following accusations that he sexually harassed a producer for one of the series on Amazon. Isa Hackett spoke to The Hollywood Reporter recently and told them about her experience getting sexually harassed by Roy Price. And immediately after the accusations and immediately after the report came out, Amazon Studios suspended Roy Price and he has since resigned from the position. Now, just to give you a refresher, Hackett told The Hollywood Reporter last week that in 2015, Price, not Prince. Price allegedly propositioned her in a cab on the way to an Amazon party, but she told him she has a wife and children. He allegedly told her, "You will love my dick," he said, according to Hackett, who relayed her account to multiple individuals in the hours after the alleged episode. 2 people corroborated that account to The Hollywood Reporter. Hackett says Price did not relent in the cab, and once they arrived at the Amazon party, so he continued harassing her. As she talked with other executives, she says that Price stepped close to her ear and loudly said anal sex. So he has resigned, he has stepped down. I haven't seen a statement from him, I haven't seen any admission from him, but nonetheless, the fact that he's no longer working there is a victory for not only Hackett, who is producing the series Man in the High Castle, but also for other women who would have to deal with him as the head of Amazon Studios.
I mean, to say that it's poor judgment at least is understating it. She says, "No, thank you, I have a wife." He goes, "You'll love my dick." Probably not, probably not. Okay, now this was unsolicited and it is clear sexual harassment. You hold a position of power over her. You could greenlight future projects or not. She told you she's not interested. You're still pursuing it and in a kind of a gross way, to say the least. And she's told you she's got a wife. She's like, "Oh, good point." On the other hand, anal sex. Okay. I mean, if you weren't worried about the sexual harassment, 1, you should be. 2, I don't know if, look, I don't even want to get into whether he was drunk or not. It doesn't matter, it's not an excuse. Really, really poor judgment.
It was poor judgment on his part, of course, but Hackett went and complained about this to Amazon and let them know what happened. So she did report it immediately. And what I found interesting was, she didn't hear anything from anyone, following her report. However, he was still employed. She just didn't see him around as much. She didn't have to work with him as closely as before. Amazon didn't suspend him until The Hollywood Reporter reported on this. So they were aware of these allegations well before The Hollywood Reporter reported on it. So look, I'm saying this because it's important to keep in mind that these types of things oftentimes do get reported to higher ups. They do get reported to human resources. And it seems like it either gets brushed under the rug or there might be a small Band-Aid placed over a gushing wound. And in this case, it seemed like they just put a Band-Aid over it until Hackett went public with what happened and people started criticizing Amazon for it.
Doesn't make a difference if there's a spotlight on something.
Of course.
Of course. And so that's why this movement is so important, because if you put a bigger spotlight on it, it's gonna make men who are predisposed to doing this a little bit more reluctant, and some small percentage of women as well. I knew someone who had actually worked here once. She told a story on air before about how she was sexually assaulted by a female executive. And so it's mainly a position of power. Yes, a hugely percentage of men do it, but either way, we gotta put a spotlight on it so people realize that they can't get away with it anymore.
More and more women are sharing their stories of sexual assault or sexual harassment, and a lot of those individuals include public figures, people in the entertainment industry, and now we're also hearing from Olympians. So Olympic gymnast Michaela Maroney shared her story of being sexually assaulted by an Olympic doctor. And this doctor is actually currently in prison. Actually, he's in jail awaiting trial on child pornography charges. But Dr. Larry Nasser, who is currently awaiting sentencing after pleading guilty to federal child pornography charges, is the person that Maroney is accusing of assaulting her for years, since she was 13 years old. Now, she used the Me Too hashtag to share her story on Twitter, and here is a portion of her statement. She said, "It started when I was 13 years old, and it didn't end until I left the sport. I had a dream to go to the Olympics, and the things that I had to endure to get there were unnecessary and disgusting. So again, it started when she was 13 years old. She said, I had flown all day, recounting one of the instances, with the team to get to Tokyo. Nasser had given me a sleeping pill for the flight, and the next thing I know, I was all alone with him in his hotel room getting treatment. I thought I was going to die that night. Now, to give you further context, there have been a number of women who have come forward accusing him of sexual assault. They would say that during these physical exams, he would place his fingers inside them and fondle them in ways that were obviously inappropriate. And so he is pleading not guilty to those charges, but when it comes to child pornography, he has agreed to plead guilty.
So one of the interesting things about the story is that he's got hundreds of lawsuits against him. So this guy was a serial abuser, and like Anna said, he's already pled guilty at least to the child pornography charges. So we kind of see where this is going, and I don't think hundreds of people are making it up. And many of Maroney's teammates had already accused Nasser of abuse while they were minors. But even so, it took all the other women coming forward before Maroney thought, you know what, there's no reason to hide it. There's no reason to feel bad about it. No, he should feel bad about it. And now she's finally coming forward too. And she's a gold medal winner, and so it's a little bit bigger spotlight. But just to see this happening in real time, as women are growing bolder and getting encouraged by each other to step out and fight back, I don't want you to underestimate what an amazing time this is. It's really, and like it's happening right in front of our eyes as the culture is shifting. Because it's apparently, and as we see one story after another, amazing what men used to get away with, and we never talked about. Ailes, Cosby, Weinstein, Trump, and the list goes on and on. Nasser, and it was all buried, all buried. You get pop little stories here and there, but we had no idea how endemic it was, and maybe women knew it a hell of a lot better than men did. But to see it unfolding in real time as women kind of stand up together collectively and go no more, it's wonderful to see. It is, and what's also incredible and depressing at the same time is because of this Me Too campaign, there have been so many women that I know personally speaking up and sharing stories that I didn't previously know about. And it's just heartbreaking to know, the number of women that we all know that have gone through this. And I've been thinking about the Me Too campaign a lot because there are women who share some of the most heinous stories, like what Maroney is talking about, being fondled, being sexually assaulted like that. And so when I think about, things that I've gone through, I feel like it's not appropriate for me to share the stories that I've experienced, right? So I have shared the story of the guy who was riding his bike and he went around, he slapped my butt. And then rode away laughing, and then he came around again to do it again, and then that was when I defended myself and I kicked him off the bike. And so that was I thought that was the only time that I had ever experienced anything like that. And then I remembered something else that I've never talked about, and I never felt shame because it happened. You hear women talk about, oh, I felt shame when it happened. But I actually feel shame now because when it happened, I just thought of it as, well, that's just the way things go and I have to accept it. And I feel embarrassed by that. So I'm not naming any names, but I remember talking to you about it, so you will remember it. You and I went to a party for a pretty big YouTuber. Oh, I remember now, yes. And there were a number of big YouTubers there, one of which I was a fan of, and we took a picture together. And as we were taking that picture, he thought that it was, by the way, my boyfriend at the time was taking the photo of us. He thought it was completely appropriate to grab my ass as that picture was being taken. And so it's weird because I at the time, I didn't like it, but I just kind of like put it in the back of my head as, this is just the way things go. This is how people treat you sometimes. There's nothing I can do about it. And that kind of stuff happens all the time. And I actually find myself lucky that I haven't had to go through some of the extreme situations that other women have had to go through. But every woman has gone through something like that, Yeah, and maybe with this movement, it's going to get a lot harder because if you're a guy and you're thinking about sexually harassing a woman or assaulting them, You sure it's not gonna get put on social media immediately? So you better think twice. And if you think that that's a bad thing, well, I got news for you. You might be the bad guy. So I think it's a great thing that women are fighting back.
I agree. Let's take one more break. When we come back, a GOP lawmaker wants to turn you away if you go to the emergency room. I'll tell you which lawmaker it is.
I got a bunch of things to go through. No Republican would have ever voted for Bernie. He would have done worse than Hillary Clinton.
They're so miserable. All right, I'm gonna stop myself before I say things that are offensive.
If I ran for office, and that would be a trippy day, right? I'd break even more rules than Trump. If I had all the money in the world, I would enjoy that. We have a great show for you. Steve's answer is C. Dave's is A, and the correct answer is, of course, B. You guys are the worst. Here's the story, and it's not funny. Steve is over too.
It seems just comically unfair and ridiculous. The Democratic Party just sucks right now. It just sucks because it doesn't know what it stands for.
We should probably wrap it up.
He's a war hero. 5.5 years. He's a war hero because he was captured. I like people that weren't captured, okay?
He said I had small hands. They're not small, are they? I never heard that one before.
I went to Kentucky Fried Chicken when I first got my license, like 17 years old or 17, 18, whatever it was. And I'm driving, I think, my dad's Oldsmobile. And I parked it in a place where there was 2 cars next to me, really tight spot, and a car behind me. I don't even know how I got in there because I'm a terrible driver. Back then I was an even worse driver. And on the roads I'm okay, but in parking spots I have terrible spatial reasoning and I'm a mess. And on my way out, I hit all 3 cars at once. I broke all records, okay? So I went, as I'm backing out, I went boom, oh shit. And this side hit that car, this side hit this car, and the back hit the 3rd car, okay? And I got stuck. I didn't know how to get out. Like I went, okay, this, and then I'm like, no, and then, right? And then finally I had to stop, go inside the KFC and go, A, I'm sorry, I hit a bunch of your cars. They're like, what do you mean a bunch of your cars? I'm like, I don't know.
Wow, there's a B?
Yeah, I'm like, I hit 3 cars, I don't know. So you guys gotta come help me, okay? Okay, so 1, my bad, really sorry about that. Yeah. Okay, number 2, can someone take my car out? Because I don't want to keep hitting your cars, and I'm incapable of taking it out of this spot. Back on the Young Turks. I want to remind you guys of a couple of things. One, we got a double stream going on here. It's
what does that even mean?
So right now on youtube.com/theyoungturks, they could be watching us. So in fact, the only way they would know that we have a double stream is if they're watching right now, and I just told you. And at the same time, there's a stream going on of the DNC Unity Reform Commission in Vegas that John Idarola and Emma Vigeland are covering. And so when our show is over, make sure you keep watching that stream. And I think afterwards they might do some interviews as well with some of the commissioners, because they're deciding important things like superdelegates, primaries or caucuses. Can anyone outside of Tom Perez see the DNC budget? Which is so weird that no other human is allowed to see it other than him and the treasurer, I think. Even the executive committee can't see it. No, like, nope.
Can't see it.
It's crazy. Anyway, and then TYT Investigates is doing a series on how the tax cuts are not leading to jobs. And I want you to make sure that you check that out as well. TYTnetwork.com/investigates for all those stories. All right, a couple of tweets for you. Michael Ritchie says, glad that Price resigned. I wouldn't want him to mar my enjoyment of the man in the high castle. The liberal Hoosier says, can we get a JR special mix-up of congressmen dissing then praising executive orders? That seems like it'd be fun to share. I hear you. We'll talk to JR about that. And then Lucy Furr says, fucking A right. We're in the middle of an evolution. Right now, enjoy it. We were born at the right time. I like it. I like the passion behind that, Lucy. It's wonderful. Yes.
But then there's a volcano that might kill all of us any minute now. So just keep that in mind too. Okay. I'm sorry, Lucy. I love you,
Lucy. All right, we'll talk about that in the post.
Yeah.
All right, what's next?
All right. A GOP lawmaker thinks it's a bad idea that people have to get treated if they go to the emergency room. In fact, she thinks that we could save doctors and this whole healthcare system a lot of money if we didn't have to treat everyone that showed up to the emergency room. Now, this is Representative Diane Black. She is from Tennessee, and she was speaking to Chuck Todd about this issue. And I want you to hear from her and what she has to say. Take a look.
You're being forced into figuring out how to subsidize that free health care that nobody pays for at the emergency room.
So let me tell you, Chuck, I'm an emergency room nurse. There are people that came into my emergency room that I, the nurse, was the first one to see them, that I could have sent them to a walk-in clinic or their doctor the next day, but because of a law that Congress put into place to say, no, I have to treat everybody that walks in that emergency room, you took away our ability to be able to say, no, an emergency room is not the proper place. And then you put a burden on top of that to say you must do that.
So you would get rid of the law that mandates emergency rooms to see every patient that shows up?
I would get rid of a law that says that you are not allowed as a healthcare professional to make that decision about whether someone can be appropriately treated the next day or at a walk-in clinic or at their doctor.
So I actually think that if all you heard was that, you might walk away thinking, well, that seems reasonable. I mean, that's a person who practiced this as a nurse and knows what it is, and she should be able to use her judgment. And if somebody came in with a flu, you could say, hey, you know what, come to the clinic tomorrow instead of taking up space in the emergency room. Okay, but that's if you don't know the history of it. And as a congresswoman now running for governor, she should know it a little bit better and the consequences that could flow from it. The person who actually signed the law into effect was a well-known liberal named Ronald Reagan. Okay, it was the Emergency Medical Treatment and Active Labor Act. Now I'm going to talk about active labor in a second. But the reason they did it is because back in the day, hospitals would do what they called patient dumping. So somebody would walk into the hospital, they're like, oh, he doesn't have insurance and it's going to cost a lot. And they would just refuse to treat him. And they would either just drive him out to the street and say goodbye and good luck, or they'd make a different hospital take them. And they kept doing this patient dumping to the point that Congress had to pass the law and Reagan signed it into effect. So before you go running around talking about like, they took my freedom away to deny you health care, look into it a little bit and find out, like that's normally I think if a law is outrageous, there must have been a good reason for it, maybe at some point. Let me find out why. And she didn't, of course, do that. And the active labor part is because women would come in pregnant in the middle of labor and hospitals would dump them anyway if they didn't have insurance. And so that's why even the pro-life movement was like, that's a fetus, that's the one thing we care about, okay? And you're sending them away in the middle of labor, and that could cause tremendous problems. So that's why they passed the law in the first place. That's why that law is absolutely necessary.
You are giving her the benefit of the doubt in saying that maybe she doesn't know the history of why this law was enacted in the first place. But I think everyone, especially someone who's a current lawmaker, knows that emergency rooms end up serving as a last resort for the poor who haven't been able to provide or to pay for health insurance, who haven't had access to health insurance. And so their health conditions get so bad that they end up in emergency rooms, right? And yeah, they should be seen by doctors if they show up to the emergency room. And look, maybe I'm too real, and maybe I see the dark side of humanity a little too much, but I don't want anyone to be the arbiter of whether or not someone deserves care at that moment, right? So she brings up someone who has a sore throat for a week or someone who might have the flu, but I'm not buying for a second that those are the only individuals that would be turned away. We all know that more people would be turned away for more serious conditions. And sometimes you go into the emergency room not knowing what's wrong with you, and maybe the symptoms don't seem that serious to the person that you're describing it to, but it might end up being something incredibly serious. What if you just got hit in the head and you're worried that you're gonna suffer a concussion? Like, these are things that you should be treated for. And so when you know the history, and when you know the demographic that typically ends up in the emergency room, you understand why that law was enacted in the first place. But by the way, another thing I wanted to state is that if you're a hospital that's not receiving any Medicare funds, you can turn people away. It's just that if you're receiving government money, taxpayer money, Medicare funds, you can't do it. You can't turn people away. So if you're genuinely against this type of law and you don't want to have to abide by it, then stop receiving Medicare money. And then you can go ahead and patient dump as much as you want.
So here in LA, in our healthcare plan, we have something called urgent care as opposed to the emergency room. It's for lighter stuff that happens to you. And I love it because everybody, of course, knows the lines in the emergency rooms, and it's a real hassle. We know that that's a real issue. So urgent care has come up now, and that's much better in this system. So we're not saying that the lines in the emergency room are not an issue. But remember, it's not like the treatment requires you to take 7 hours with the person. If they just have a sore throat and they sat through whatever they had to sit through and they got to you, you say, okay, now here's Advil for your throat and we're done with it. It's not like you're mandated to do anything else. In fact, it would probably take you almost the same amount of time to dismiss them. Because how do you know if they have a sore throat or they don't? Which leads to a story of mine, which is pretty tragic. A really good friend of mine, his father, this was in Turkey, now it doesn't apply to our laws, but it gives you a sense of what can go wrong in a hospital, was his father was involved in an accident and the doctors looked at him and thought he was fine. It turns out they were negligent, he wasn't. He had internal bleeding and he died. So that's why when you go to the emergency room, yes, someone should take a couple of minutes out to make sure you're okay and not dump you on the streets and go, I'm using my good judgment to make sure I don't treat you. That's not the kind of country we should be.
All right, moving on. Donald Trump loves to talk about fake news. Anytime anyone in the media writes something that appears to be critical, Trump just brushes it off as false reporting and fake. However, it turns out that him repeatedly saying that is kind of working. And some Americans do believe that the media is fabricating stories about Trump and his administration. So Politico and Morning Consult did a poll on this, and here's what they found. If you look at all voters and you take a representative sample and look at all voters, it turns out that 46% of voters say yes, the media is making up stories about Trump. 37% say no, and 17% are undecided.
Look, this is really important. They're not saying that the media is biased and slanting the stories or giving their opinion on the stories. They're saying that the news media is fabricating the stories. Fabricating, just making it up out of whole cloth. So, in fact, Donald Trump did have a record-breaking size at his inauguration, but the news media got together and decided to fabricate that the crowds were not that big, and they fabricated the pictures. I mean, I'm just giving you one example.
Are we fabricating his tweets too? Are we fabricating things that he says on television himself? I mean, anyway, okay. It's just absurd because even if we did absolutely no reporting whatsoever, he says things himself. He tweets, he can't stop himself from tweeting. He attacks people, he gets involved in these ridiculous like non-issues and these fights. Anyway, all right, let's focus on Republicans, Democrats, independents, yada, yada. What do they think? Like when you divvy it up, when you divvy up the voters and look at their ideological background, what do they think in regard to news coverage on Trump? When it comes to Republicans, of course, the vast majority think that the media is fabricating stories about them. 76% of Republican voters say yes, there are fabrications in the media on Trump. 11% say no.
Okay, so let's pause there for a second. Now you're gonna say, okay, yeah, of course Republicans believe that more. But no, let's pause to note that 3/4 of Republicans in this country have lost their minds. So if you say the corporate media is biased, I'm gonna agree with you guys. I'm not trying to defend their bias. And you know I've said this a million times. I think they have an establishment bias. The status quo is great. They work for a multi-billion-dollar corporation. But I also have worked there. I know a lot of those folks. I know how the system works. They don't just sit in a room and go, what can we make up about anyone, whether it's Donald Trump or Bernie Sanders, who I really like. No, they're slanted. They think Bernie Sanders shouldn't be president. They will take something he said and twist his words a little bit, right? So I understand that. I feel your pain if you think they're biased, whether we're on the same side or not. But they don't go in a room and go, let's just make up a story about Bernie Sanders. Out of whole cloth, let's just imagine it. And don't worry, our editors won't fire us for fabricating a story. They don't do it about Trump. And 3/4 of Republicans in this country believe something that isn't remotely true. We've lost them. We've lost them. They don't live in this reality. They live in an alternate reality.
So the numbers are different when it comes to Democrats. Only 20% of Democrats believe that the media is fabricating stories about Trump and the administration. 65% say no.
Sorry, real quick, pause there too. 20% of Democrats think the media is inventing stories, fabricating stories about Trump. Oh my God, the media has lost all credibility.
No, it's about to get a lot worse. And also, it's something that I think everyone, regardless of your ideology, should be concerned about because this is like the roadmap to a tyrannical government. And the reason why I say that is because the media is so important in holding elected officials accountable, whether they're on the right or the left, it doesn't matter. Journalism is important, right? And if you have an American electorate that is distrustful of the media and doesn't see the value of journalism, you are essentially paving the way for someone like Trump to do some pretty terrible things. So look, very quickly, when it comes to independents, 44% believe the media is making up stories about Trump, 31% say no.
We've lost independents.
Yeah.
Independents are actually now real. Before they were just, they were to some degree Republican leaning for a long time. Independents are now true independents and they do decide elections. I've seen that happen right in front of my eyes over the course of the last decade or so. And partly because people are no longer attached to party labels like they were in earlier times. And if you've lost independence, that's really bad news. And for the majority of independents, or at least the plurality of independents, to say, yes, the news media is liars who just make up stories about Trump, oh, that's really bad news. And we didn't invent that.
So just to give you more bad news, and what I would argue is the scariest part about all of this, there are Americans who believe that the government, Trump specifically, should have the ability to take licenses away from news organizations. Now, if you could recall, recently Trump criticized NBC News and said that NBC News should have its license revoked. And apparently there are Americans who think that the president should have the power to do that. Let's go to graphic 18. Now, it's a small portion of the country overall, but it still concerns me. 28% think the government should have the power to revoke broadcast licenses of major news organizations that it says are fabricating news stories about a president or the administration, while 51% think the government should not be able to do that. Another 21% are undecided. Okay, so here are specific numbers that are tied to parties. More than 2/3 of Democrats, 68%, think the federal government should not have the power to revoke broadcast licenses of those organizations. Only 68%. Like, what's going on? There are Democrats that think that it's okay for the government to revoke licenses from news organizations that it doesn't like. You're gonna allow them to be the arbiter of what is and is not fabricated news and have the power to revoke their licenses? What is wrong with you? That is fucking insane. That is so incredibly devastating. Like, Democrats? Okay, well, we've completely lost it. So let's go on to Republicans. 46% of Republicans think the government should have the power, and a third of GOP voters who don't think so. So a third of GOP voters say no, shouldn't have the power to do that. But 46% of Republicans believe, yeah, definitely. The government should have the power to revoke licenses from news organizations that it doesn't like.
Okay, so if you're in that camp who believes that, you're un-American. You are. It's one of the most central parts of our government. But the First Amendment guarantees the freedom of the press. If you don't agree, first of all, if you don't think that we should apply the First Amendment, I assume that you will immediately agree that we also should not apply the Second Amendment. Oh wait, you like to pick and choose among amendments? I thought you were constitutionalists, right-wingers. No. You don't love the Constitution, you don't love this country, you don't love our system.
You guys are throwing feces at one another over Ben Shapiro giving a speech at Berkeley, right? Because, oh my God, this is a violation of our constitutional amendments if they don't allow him to speak. Which, by the way, again, for the billionth time, I agree with that. He should be allowed to speak, Ann Coulter should be allowed to speak. Whatever deplorable individual you want on that campus should be allowed to speak. But at the same time, you're gonna turn around and say that the government should be able to revoke licenses for media organizations that it doesn't like?
So,
wow.
So that's deeply disturbing for what Americans think, how Donald Trump has driven that narrative, and unfortunately it's worked. He recently did a tweet, I mean, he said fake news a million times, and he accused CNN and all the rest of being, quote, fiction writers. He just tweeted that the other day. But there is one other factor here, and one other party that's responsible, and that is the mainstream media. And so, now, there are a lot of things that I disagree with the mainstream media on. I've done stories about 1,000 Morning Joe mistakes, and the way that they frame it, they're preposterous. They talk about what the American people think, and they don't back it up with polling. I did one on Chuck Todd, etc. Do I think that NBC's license should be taken away? Are you insane? No, I also can speak, and I could show you their clip, and then I could show you our clip, that I could show you data to prove us right. That is called more speech. And by the way, you're allowed to do the same exact thing. You're allowed to do it on YouTube, Facebook, anywhere you like, and you could even make stuff up, and you often do on the right wing, over and over and over again. And then turn around and go, can you believe people are making stuff up? Okay, are you kidding me? Look at the right-wing blogs. Half of it on that, half of the stuff on there is made up. And we're not talking about ending their freedom of speech, even though they consistently actually lie.
By the way, you know that journalists can get sued at any time for defamation. Like, we have laws that prevent people from flat out lying about people, whether it's an elected official or a private citizen. If you are found guilty of defamation laws, you're gonna face some serious consequences for that. No one is allowed to just fabricate stories about anyone. Okay, there are already laws preventing that from happening. Do journalists sometimes get facts wrong? Absolutely, they're humans, and should they get criticized for that? Yes. But to say that they're making up stories about the president is absolutely ludicrous. And quite honestly, it makes me feel like we're just wasting our time, right? Like, what are we doing? We're wasting our time. They don't want to believe it because it goes against what they already believe, their preconceived notions.
No, we have to win the independence. And that is why I'm so mad at the establishment media, because they refuse to acknowledge their bias and thereby hurt the rest of the media, because they keep saying, oh, we're neutral. We're objective. We have no bias at all. And for some of them, that's absolutely true. And a lot of the print guys are terrific. Reuters, McClatchy, The Guardian, The Intercept, I can go on and on and on, right? But for cable news guys and for a lot of the broadcast news guys, they favor the status quo. They do, but they don't recognize it. They think that everything is wonderful. We shouldn't have too much change. Everyone on the left is a radical. Everyone on the right is a radical. And they say it and they pound that message home all the day. Now, I don't care in that I'm not gonna shut them down for it. I disagree with them. That's okay. But when they say that they have a monopoly on the truth, and the truth is that the status quo is great, what the rest of the country hears is, screw you, you're not on my side. And when I say that to the establishment media, they get really angry. But knuckleheads, we're unlike these guys, we're not trying to tear you down. We're trying to make it better so that people actually trust you again. But if you keep telling everybody that anyone who wants change is a radical, and people like Hillary Clinton and by the way, Mike Pence and establishment Republicans and establishment Democrats are awesome and they're honorable gentlemen, and that we should go back to the middle and keep doing what their donors say. When you do ridiculous things like pretend that money in politics doesn't matter. No, these are honorable gentlemen having a debate in Congress. They're not having a debate. They took a check and then they did what their donors told them to do. When you pretend things like that, you lose all credibility. And what you're doing, unfortunately, is helping the other side attack the core principles of America and helping them destroy the freedom of the press. You're not helping, you're hurting. We're trying to fix it, but I don't know that we're ever gonna get through to the establishment press or to the right wing, or now even some Democrats who think, no, they just get in a room, have like fantasy time, make up random stories and then print them or put them on TV.
Man, this is incredibly embarrassing and depressing.
And by the way, and no matter what you guys are saying, and honestly what we're saying, Trump is at 44%. Now for most presidents, that's a really bad number. But for him, he's climbing. He was in the mid-30s. He's going up to 44%. Man, they are just, folks in America are not listening to the media. The media has been overwhelmingly negative to Trump. And people are going, I don't care, I like him anyway.
All right, well, enjoy what he's about to do to your life. And what he's been doing to your life, to be quite honest. Enjoy it.
Yeah.
Have fun.
Unfortunately, we'll be proven right again about Trump, but it won't be pretty in the meanwhile. All right, we gotta go, guys. We will see you in the postgame. Bye-bye.